I want to hear cannons. Downfield, pull up, ball to the 5, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans does it again. Fire the cannons, Bucs.
It's first and goal. That's picked up. And who else? Rondé Barber. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may ride to the Super Bowl with that one.
Third down, 18. Dropping Gannon, looking Gannon. Throws up with the head. Intercepted. At the 40. Derek Brooks 30. Brooks to the 25. 20. Derek Brooks all the way. There it is. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl. And there the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Hello and welcome back, Bucs fans, to a new edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, joined alongside me, as always, my good buddy and co-host from BucsNation.com, Evan Wanish. It has been a little bit since we've talked to you. The Buccaneers enjoying a 10-day break after overtime on Thursday Night Football, so we took a little bit of a break as well. But we are back with more content as we look ahead to Week 6 in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers' upcoming game. Another division opponent here, Evan, against the New Orleans Saints. This is going to be an interesting game this week because if you're local to the area, even if you're not local to the area, Evan, a lot of people have heard about the approaching Hurricane Milton down here, and obviously some things being adjusted this week to make some plans and preparations for that. The Buccaneers evacuated to New Orleans for practice this week, so they are up there away from the team facility. And then for the Saints, they're dealing with some injuries, specifically at the quarterback position. Derek Carr been one of the better QBs in the NFL up until this point. It looks like he may possibly be missing multiple weeks of action here for New Orleans. So you're looking at either Jake Haener or most likely Spencer Rattler, another rookie QB for Tampa Bay so far this season. This is shaping up to be one hell of a week and ultimately one interesting game on Sunday.
For sure. And first off, want to make sure everybody, hope you guys stay safe during the hurricane, whether you evacuate or not. I know we have a lot of listeners. Obviously, most of our listener base is from Florida. So I hope everybody stays safe and hope everybody can make it through this. I know, one hurricane after another freaking sucks. But yeah, I mean, for the Buccaneers, they've had a whirlwind of a week, basically, right? We were talking before the show. To me, this game is almost impossible to predict at this point because you have a Buccaneers team who's had its schedule really thrown off. And I understand this isn't the first time in NFL history that a hurricane, a hurricane derailed week 1 for them in 2017. So it's not the first time that their schedule has been adjusted, right, for a hurricane. But it's just all compounding into one, right? You're not in the same environment. Your practice routine is going to be a little different. And then you have the Saints who aren't going to have their starting quarterback now. So, and it's two teams that actually, need a win. Really, you can almost argue that the Saints possibly need to win more than the Buccaneers. And they're starting 2-0. The Saints have lost 3 straight games. They're now 2-3. Now, they have lost, the first 2 games that they lost were by a combined 5 points. They lost to the Eagles by 3 and the Falcons by 2. Then they just lost to Kansas City. So the Saints are actually coming off of a short week here. They played Monday night against Kansas City, and then the Buccaneers have had the 10-day break. So you would say the Bucs should be, like the rest advantage should be to Tampa, right? It should be. And it obviously proved costly for the Saints because, Monday night, their starting quarterback goes down. So the Buccaneers may be facing a rookie quarterback in Spencer Rattler. And I've seen a lot of people when I posted that on my story about, it's most likely Spencer Rattler. There was a ton of people that were like in the comments or mentioning me or replying to the story saying, oh, here we go. The rookie quarterback, here we go. It's kind of not true. It's kind of, I think the issue is from 2011 to 2017, rookie quarterbacks had a record of 11-1 against the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers were 1-11 against rookie quarterbacks from that stretch. But since Todd Bowles arrived in 2019, the Bucs are 11-6. So, it's not crazy. I think a lot of the times people think of the rookie quarterbacks and they think of the ones that stand out, right? And we talked about this before the Commanders game and before the Broncos game. They think about the ones that stand out. Daniel Jones, because the Bucs blew that big lead. CJ Stroud, because that was a game the Bucs blew a lead. And now Bo Nix, because it's the most recent one. I think that's what sticks out in people's heads, but they don't realize that that's 3 of them. You take out those 3, the Bucs are 11-3 against rookie quarterbacks. So since Bo's arrived, they've actually done quite decent against rookie QBs. And you say, well, okay, but a lot of the rookie quarterbacks are guys like, Mac Jones or this and that. Okay, who's to say Spencer Rattler's a world beater, right? I mean, that we don't know what Spencer Rattler's going to be. But I mean, they've beaten some good ones too. Like I believe they beat Kyler Murray his rookie year. Jaden Daniels sure looks pretty darn good, So he sure does look pretty darn good. That's looking better and better each week, right, as the season goes along. So the whole rookie QB thing, I think, is a little bit overblown at this point.
Yeah, I think it's, people love to find things to freak out over. And it's a storyline. It's one of those sexy storylines that I think a lot of people gravitate towards when you hear about how awful the Buccaneers were during that stretch of time that you had brought up. But yeah, 1-1 against rookie quarterbacks so far in the 2024 season, potentially playing Spencer Rattler, who could be starting for the Saints this week. So looking to make it 2-1. I'll be honest with you. Like you said, we don't know what Spencer Rattler is going to be. I'd like to be wrong, but I was not a fan of his. I haven't been a fan of his for a while. I wasn't a fan of his at South Carolina. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I think the Saints and Dennis Miller, it's going to be an interesting week for them to try and game plan him into what they're doing. They were doing great. I mean, their new offensive coordinator had them looking fantastic the first 2 weeks of the season. And we even talked about it on the show. We're like, hey, the Saints put up almost 50 2 weeks in a row. Is this a coincidence here? Is this something that's gonna start to slow down here? And yeah, it did, as the ebbs and the flows of the NFL season take place. But yeah, it should be a fun matchup for sure. Diving a little more into it for Tampa Bay, just a couple of injury headlines from last week. Linebacker Servassier Dennis was placed on injured reserve, so he will miss a couple of weeks. The Bucs also placed outside linebacker Marquise Watts on IR, and they placed wide receiver Cody Thompson on the practice squad injured list. They also signed wide receiver Tanner Canoe to the practice squad to make up for the whole. So as we dive a little more into this matchup against New Orleans at the end of this week, I wanted to talk about the Buccaneers offense and really the strides that they have been making so far in 2024. When we look at the track record over the first 5 games for play caller Liam Cohen, I think he's really only come out and laid one stinker on us, and that's the performance against the Broncos. And even looking back at that game, was it a scheme issue or was it player execution? And I'd argue it was a little more of the latter, because we talked about how dejected the team looked. A lot of guys looked like they didn't want to be out there. Execution errors all over the field. So say what you want about the play calling. It wasn't great, but the player execution certainly didn't help either. I think Sean Payton just did a really good job making his team look like the more efficient one. But, I got to say, Evan, you look across the statistics here, and this is an exciting one. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are 9th in points per game. They are currently 9th in EPA per play. They are 10th in EPA per pass, and they are 13th in EPA per rush. Now, a lot of people are asking, what is EPA, right? And let me pull up the official definition so someone can explain it better than I can. I had it pulled up earlier, and now I don't. That's why we're professionals. So the EPA stands for expected points added, and it is a metric, a way to measure a team's offensive and defensive performance and how it compares to the league average. So it gives you a play-by-play measure of a team's success. When the Buccaneers run the football, how successful are they compared to all the other teams running the football in this scenario? I think is kind of what we're getting at. I don't know if I'm over-explaining here or if I'm not saying enough, but, Baker Mayfield playing well has a lot to do with that. But before we dive into Baker, I just wanted to talk about, again, Liam Cohen and some of the categories the Buccaneers are looking better in. The run game has been still a work in progress, but, some of these 2 running back sets, they're finding a lot of success in, and they look like they're getting better.
Yeah, slowly but surely, right? And again, it wasn't going to happen overnight with this run game. I think it's kind of how bad it was, right? I think it kind of speaks because, look, they improved in 2023 from 2022. but it also was going to be pretty difficult to be worse than they were in 2022. So naturally, they were going to improve. But if you look at the numbers, they didn't really improve that much from 2022 to 2023. Like, it was a very small margin. So in coming into 2024 with a brand new offensive coordinator, a rookie running back coming into the fold, it was going to be a work in progress, right? I didn't think they were going to come out in the first 5-6 weeks of the year and just all of a sudden be this great running football team. And I think you hope by the end of the year they're closer to average, especially if the passing offense can keep up what they've been doing. I know that's easier said than done, to keep up that pace every single week of what they've been able to do. But if the running game can become average, I think that helps the passing game, right? Because it makes defenses more honest. So it all comes together as one, I think. And again, I think it's a work in progress, and you have seen some strides. Rachaad White had a decent game against Atlanta. Now, I mean, he did have the one long run, which I talked about on the post game show of that game, kind of inflated his stats a bit. Bucky Irving's looked pretty good despite that late fumble that he had, but I am curious to see how they manage those two workloads coming up here as we play more football, because the wear and tear, as we've seen with the Buccaneers injury reports, right? The wear and tear is real of the NFL season, and these guys, Rachaad White and Bucky Irving, have both already at different points this year popped up on the injury report. So I'm curious to see how they manage those guys moving forward, and you got a couple more weeks at least to the bye week. You're still not very. I know you've had a mini bye week here, but you're still not just quite home yet for the bye week, and then you get that easier stretch down the stretch. But you got some games here that are pretty critical. So I'm curious to see how they manage the run game and how the run game performs, because not only are they critical, you're facing some pretty darn good quarterbacks in that stretch as well. Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Brock Purdy. I mean, Kirk Cousins just lit you up for 500 yards. The best way to not let that happen, don't let those guys on the field, right? And one of the best ways to control the game, control the clock, is to run the football better. So hopefully they can do that.
Yeah, we can talk about how the second half of that game played out, obviously, but for the most part, you could tell it was going to be a high-scoring shootout from the first drive of the game for Atlanta. The Bucs answered right away, and they were keeping pace with the Falcons throughout that first half. It was score for score for score for score. This is an offense that at its best is efficient and knows how to answer in games like that. And that's all you can ask for. But we talked about, some of the success in the passing game. We'll talk about that in a second. But, highlighting some more of the successful plays for Tampa Bay so far under Liam Cohen, a lot of the success for them is coming out of this 21 personnel look. And it's a 2 running back, 1 tight end set. They call it the pony package. We've made reference to it before on the show. And we talked a little bit about the inclusion of Rachaad White, Bucky Irving, allowing them to get a little more creative over the course of the season, but also wanted to talk about Cade Otton, man, who headed into the season, let's be honest, I don't know too many people who had a huge amount of faith in Cade Otton as the tight end 1 for Tampa Bay. And he has, had a couple of catches here the last few weeks, and I think he's showing more and more that in some of these play designs, he can step up and be a pass-catching tight end, and he's making some big plays.
I've always thought Otton as a guy who was a really good tight end 2, low end tight end 1. And I still think that. I still think he's a serviceable tight end 1. I don't think, he's going to be a game breaker, but also like this Buccaneers offense doesn't really need that, right? Like that's not a part of their offense, right? Like the tight end isn't the most critical piece to their success. So it is good to see him get into the mix though. He's had some drops so far this year, so you want to get them cleaned up. I will never understand why, if you're any type of receiver, tight end, or running back or anything like that, why you're not wearing gloves, but whatever. It helps. I don't, it makes your hands stickier. I don't understand why you're not wearing gloves. You're putting yourself at a disadvantage. Like there's no way that your hands are going to be better without gloves than with them. I'm sorry. And there was a point, I think last year or maybe the year, it might have been the year before, he wore gloves for a couple of games. Like, why not just go back? But he has had some drops, but overall, I mean, he's shown up bigger these past few weeks, especially. First couple of games, he was a little quiet. But the last 2 or 3 games, he's come up big. And they're going to need to keep him getting involved because, look, I mean, We don't know the status of a guy, Jalen McMillan, yet. Trey Palmer, the Buccaneers, like I said, with their week that they're having right now, their injury report hasn't come out yet. I don't even know if they're started to practice yet today. I don't know. So we're not sure the statuses of those guys. Palmer dealing with the concussion, McMillan dealing with the hamstring. If those guys are both out, Sterling Shepard's fine, but you're going to need somebody else to step up in the receiving game besides Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and Cade Otton could certainly be that guy.
Yeah, just to mention some of those offensive injuries, hopefully the right tackle, Luke Gedeke, should be back this week. We haven't heard any concrete updates on him, but has now missed multiple games, has not cleared concussion protocol, which, again, in very rare instances where a guy has an actual concussion and things take multiple weeks. So hopefully we get a concrete update on him before the next time we talk to you. But also, if you want to read a little bit more about the Buccaneers and their offensive usage, specifically diving into their usage of 21 personnel, there is a really good article on pewterreport.com from Josh Capo. Make sure you go check that out. But let's highlight the quarterback for a minute, because a lot of what's been making this offense tick so far has been the level of play that we've seen from quarterback Baker Mayfield. And here's the numbers. He's got 1,164 passing yards, which is 10th in the NFL. Tied for second in the league with 11 passing touchdowns through the air, 107 rushing yards on the ground, 2 rushing touchdowns as well. So 13 total touchdowns for the QB1. He is tied for 13th in the NFL with a 56.9 QBR and an overall grade of 84.9. Third out of 53 quarterbacks. I don't know why it's not showing me how many interceptions he has this year. I believe it is only 2. I think it's 11 touchdowns to 2 interceptions so far for Big Bake. Can he consistently keep playing this well? I know that the Bucs lose an overtime heartbreaker in overtime against the Falcons, but the offense, apart from the second half, I still felt like if the Bucs offense had seen the field in overtime, they were going to win that game. And a lot of that has to do with, I think, the trust that I have in Baker at this point. He's for the first part of the season, over the first 5 games, he's showing a lot more consistency than he did this time last year, for sure.
He definitely did. And I think it's because while it is a different offense, right? It's not the same exact offense that they're running, from last year, but it's basically the same players. There's not really much difference, right? Mike Evans still there, Chris Godwin's still there, Rachaad White still there, Cade Otton still there. The offensive line is largely the same. Graham Barton and Ben Bredesen are there, but who's protecting him is largely, pretty much the same environment. He doesn't have to start, learning to be in a new environment, right? A new place. And I think he's just more comfortable. And I think you're seeing that. Now, the question that I have is not so much with Mayfield. It's, the Bucs trusting Baker Mayfield, right? And putting the ball in his hands more. And I think they should have. Yeah. I think they lost in Atlanta partly because they didn't put the ball in his hands more. He threw the ball 8 times in the second half. 8 total times. That can't happen. He was on fire in the first half. Finished that game with still under 200 yards passing. With the first half that he had, finished the game, did not even reach 200 yards.
3 touchdowns in that first half.
Yeah, and then just they didn't score another touchdown in the second half. I wonder why, and they had multiple opportunities. And again, we're not going to rehash, the Atlanta game. We did that. If you want to go back and listen to the post-game show, you're more than welcome to do that. But I think Baker has been really good this year, and it's proven, a lot of people, I wouldn't say myself included, because I have a lot more faith in Baker heading into this year than I did last year. But he's been better than I've even expected at times this year. A win like the game he had in Detroit was massive. Being down the guys, they were fighting back. Without Luke Gedeke there. The games against Philly and Washington where he just kind of dominated from the jump. And then you have Atlanta where he was dominating from the jump, and they kind of took their foot off the gas. And I don't quite understand why. And I don't really think that's Mayfield's fault, but you'd like to see them be able to keep your foot on the gas for a full 4 quarters, and you wouldn't have an issue right now. You'd be 4-1 probably. So Yeah, I think it's about, them trusting him more in bigger spots, I think. And I'm not saying that, that's they don't trust him and they don't believe he can be the guy or this and that. It's just, I think on game day, I think you have to realize that, look, your best option is probably to pass the football. And I think the better Baker Mayfield plays and the longer he plays this way, the more trust he's going to gain. Now, I will say, last year he started off the season decently too, right? Last year he started off the year well, and then about midway through the year, as the team did as well, right? The team itself did sort of hit that lull, right? I mentioned how they had started 3-1 in 2023 as well, ended up being 3-5. They started 3-1. They just lost the game to going 3-2. You can't let this snowball. And I think that's something where Mayfield's going to have to be one of the guys that's going to have to step up in these games at New Orleans, a tough place to play, against a Dennis Allen defense that has given the Buccaneers fits, right? Has really caused some issues, but Mayfield played well there last year. That was actually the game the Bucs wanted to go to 3-1 last year. Then you got the Ravens, looking like one of the best teams in the NFL. They've won 3 straight ball games. The Falcons again, the 49ers, one of the NFC's best. So, like, you're going to need Mayfield in a lot of these games to step up, and he can't hit a lull like he did last year, right? And I mean, like I said, the team as a whole, hit that lull, but Mayfield did as well, and you can't let that happen. So, so far the early returns on the season have been good, and I'm curious to see how the rest of his year goes.
Baker Mayfield as a starter, 2-1 against the Saints. He beat him as the starting quarterback for the Panthers, believe it or not, in 2022. And then he beat him once as a starter for Tampa Bay early in the season. You mentioned that game last year, and he was playing well in that game. He was 25 of 32, 246, 3 touchdowns, and an interception on the day. He also had 8 carries for 31 yards. The Buccaneers win that game. And then later on, New Year's Eve, you play the same New Orleans defense. I know circumstances are different for both of those teams. Injuries played a factor, but the Bucs were 1 win away from clinching the NFC South, from clinching the division for the 3rd year in a row.
At home.
All they had to do was show up. That was a Saints team with very little to play for.
Well, that's what the Bucs thought. All they had to do was show
right,
up.
Yeah. I mean, Baker, his numbers look better than he actually was in that game. He was 22 for 33, 309, 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, but he got a lot of that yardage at the end of the game. I mean, the final score can speak for itself, but that was an offense that for 3.5 quarters was not productive. So again, it's an interesting matchup to think what this team's going to look like against Dennis Miller and his defensive coordinator this week. They've given the Bucs problems in the past, but I wanted to ask you really quickly before we move on here to kind of the second half of the show, talk about the Buccaneers defense. Do you think, we're 5 games into this thing and it feels a little ridiculous asking this question, but do you think with the sample size that we have over the first 5 games, have we already seen the best of the Bucs this year?
It's a good question. Yeah, that is a good question. I mean, look, I don't really know if you're going to see much better performance than the Philly game. And I mean, I know it was Philly also causing some of their own mistakes. But I mean, that's a really good performance there.
Yeah.
Have we seen the best of the Bucs? I'm going to say no, because we haven't seen them 100% healthy. And I understand that it's a real possibility that we may never, right? I understand that it's a real possibility that we're just not going to see this team at 100% health. Look, that's a lot of the NFL teams, right? That's not just Tampa Bay, but Antoine Winfield Jr. has played 1 game. Calijah Cancey has played 0 games. Luke Gedeke has played 1 game. Now you're without Trey Palmer and Jalen McMillan. Vita Vea missed a game. So, like, you haven't really seen them at full 100% strength yet. So I do think there could be a stretch, right? There could be a stretch of games where, they look really good. I think last year, the best we saw them was a 2-game stretch in December, right? It was the Green Bay and then Jacksonville, right? And I think that was the best Bucs that you saw in 2023. And then I think this year could be something similar, especially when you look at their schedule post bye week, right? I mean, right now, their schedule post bye week, you don't want to disrespect any team, but it's pretty light. You know, I mean, you got at the Giants, at the Panthers versus the Raiders, at the Chargers, at the Cowboys versus Panthers versus Saints. I, you could, I mean, theoretically, there's 7 games there. You could go 6-1. I mean, I'm not saying they will, but they could. I mean, they very name me a game that they're absolutely 100% going to lose. You can't, you know. I mean, so there's a chance there that this isn't the best Bucs that we've seen, the best version of this Tampa Bay Buccaneers team that we've seen. Now, I think you're hoping, you know, a lot of those 7 games or whatever, you may not need the best version of Tampa Bay to win those games. So I think you're hoping the best version of the Bucs comes in this 5-game stretch here at New Orleans versus Baltimore versus Atlanta, at Kansas City versus San Francisco. I think you're hoping that this is the best version of the Bucs because, you know, this 5-game stretch, I mean, I think if you even go 2-3, it's a success. Especially if those 2 wins are against New Orleans and Atlanta. I think that's really big for them to be divisional games. But that is a good question. I mean, that is a good question. And something that I don't know if we have the 100% answer to, but I'm going to lean no just because the amount of injuries this team has had. I think that there could be another level there.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think with the offense, you know, again, looking at that performance against Philly, how much better can you get?
The offense maybe the offense might not get much better.
You can get a little healthier. You can get a little healthier in certain areas. You can get playmakers back, and that's all fine and dandy. But I agree with what you said, especially because of, I guess, the catching up. It feels like the defense has to do a little bit. I know injuries have really played a major part in the production or the lack thereof. You know, giving 500 yards up to Kirk Cousins is absolutely ridiculous on Thursday night. He just got named, literally a couple minutes ago, just got named NFC Offensive Player of the Week because of that performance. Disgusting. But is that going to be the outlier, right? Is the secondary really that bad, or is it just a good matchup and a good night for Kirk Cousins and the Falcons? Like, are they going to play again here in a couple of weeks and do that same exact thing? Is Todd Bowles going to fail to make adjustments again? Is kind of the million-dollar question there. But the health of their players being a huge thing, and I'd argue the development too. Headed into week 1, we heard what people were saying and what they thought about defensive tackle Logan Hall. The guy's got 3 sacks on the season, and ever since, he's been pretty damn good these last couple of weeks. So there are some guys that take a little bit of time. I think, you know, KJ Britt still obviously trying to find his footing. Maybe the Bucs address the linebacker position, maybe they don't. But regardless, they have to get healthy on the defensive side of the ball. And I think if this team is playing at full strength, they are going to be a much better defense than we have seen so far. So yeah, I agree with what you said. I think there is a level there that we haven't seen, but I feel really, really good about the highs that we have seen so far for the start of this season, because I think that a lot goes into an NFL season and a team playing well, but that much more goes into them starting well and coming out of the season ready to play and ready to compete against some of these tougher teams like Detroit. And I mean, even the loss against Denver, you know, they're looking good every single week, but Washington's playing really well too. Philly's in shambles, but I think the Bucs are doing a lot of good here in the early part of the season for sure. For both of us to think that there's another level they haven't reached yet.
Yeah, and I think this is a pretty good transition, you know, to the defense. You talk about, you know, what this defense is going to be the outlier, right? Because people are acting like, oh my God, people are acting like the defense has just been giving up that amount of yards every single game. And it's just not really true. I mean, you know, Jared Goff, the Lions had a lot of yards. The Bucs played, you know, bend but don't break. Did a pretty good job in the red area. Were able to hold them. But like, as far as like yards, I mean, Jared Goff had 307 yards. He threw the ball 55 times. Like, you know, Kirk Cousins, I think, threw 58 times. You know, so like, yeah, and he had a ton of yards, 509, helps a little bit with overtime, right? Because he would have been under 500 had it not been for overtime, but still, I mean, you know, 400 plus yards is still pretty bad. But it's not like the Bucs have just been giving up yards and yards and yards over and over again. And, you know, I mean, they gave up less than 300 yards, 299 against Washington. They gave up a good bit against Detroit, but not crazy. I mean, 463 yards, a lot. You play bend but don't break. So you ended up winning that game. Denver, 352 total yards. Okay, about for offenses nowadays, and especially because the offense didn't really do the defense much favors there. The offense barely got a first down, I think, in like the first quarter. And then against Philly, 227 total yards Philly had, and Atlanta, obviously. So again, yeah, is that the outlier, right? Atlanta having 550 yards of offense, right? Nearly 600 yards of offense. I think it probably is the outlier. I think they're somewhere in the middle, right? I don't think they're not as good as Philly, right? Allowing 227 total yards, but they're also not as bad as that. And I think, again, that mattered. You saw a team that 4 days earlier, you saw a defense that 4 days earlier played in 110-degree heat and then had to go on the road with the injuries they had. And I'm not making excuses. They shouldn't have lost that game, right? They had it and they let it slip away. The defense was putrid. But I think you saw some guys that were just exhausted.
Yeah.
I mean, just physically exhausted. And hopefully they come back refreshed after this mini bye week here. So I do understand the worry, right? Because, like a guy like KJ Britt's still going to be in there, right? Like, I know he was a big talking point against Atlanta, opening up the middle of the field. KJ Britt did not have a good day, right? And look, KJ Britt's never been great at coverage. He's never been that bad.
Hey, don't worry. There's a really good coverage linebacker who just hit the open market.
Yeah. Might as well.
We'll talk about that before we close the show. But
KJ Britt, again, like he's never been that bad, right? So is he going to be that bad every week? Probably not. Like that was really bad. Getting Winfield back should help. He'll be back probably soon. I don't know about this week, but I would guess it's within the next 2 or 3 weeks. Cancey, Bowles alluded to it last week. That had the Thursday game been played on Sunday, Cancey would have had a better shot at playing. Have to imagine that bodes pretty well for him this week. Vita Vea gets another week to sort of rest up. He came back, but he's probably not 100% healthy. He gets another week to rest up. And I think, with the defense getting healthier, I think they are, again, they're not as good as they were against Philly, not as bad against Atlanta. So they're somewhere in the middle there, and we're going to find out whether that middle is good enough or not.
Yeah, absolutely. You had mentioned the potential returns on defense from injury, Calijah Cancey being one of those names. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that if not both of them, one or the other will be back in the lineup for the Bucs this week, and that is between defensive tackle Calijah Cancey and safety Antoine Winfield Jr. Now,
also, hang on, real quick. I saw something in the chat that said they allowed 352 yards to Bo Nix. Simply not true. Bo Nix was 25 of 36 for 216 yards. So I don't know where that's coming from.
Well,
I don't know.
He had that Lamar like performance.
Yeah, I mean he had some rushing yards, but even if you count the rushing yards, it's still not at 352. So I don't know.
I don't know. But hopefully the Buccaneers get some reinforcements back in that defensive lineup. You need some stars, man. You talked about some of the guys who have been stepping up and playing well with a next man up mentality, but the wear and tear that comes with it. I mean, for a while, you were dangerously thin along that defensive line. You're calling up practice squad guys, CJ Brewer getting signed to the team to come in and fill out. Greg Gaines, who granted has played well with the extra snaps, but he was talking about how hurt and sore he was, right? He was playing 60-plus snaps for the Buccaneers in a game without Vita Vea next to him. So you're hoping guys like that with Cancey's return can get a little bit of a break. You mentioned Vita Vea as well. So something to keep an eye on. But we are going to wrap up today's show with this. KJ Britt struggling in coverage last week against the Falcons. I mean, KJ Britt not having the best 2024 campaign, I would say. So it brings up an interesting dilemma at linebacker, if you will. I mean, KJ Britt's the guy. Listen, KJ Britt's the guy. Coming into this year, we said he was going to be the guy. Maybe he was a little overhyped. Maybe we thought we were in better hands after how well he played in 2023. But regardless, it's been a slow start for him. The Buccaneers play Servassier Dennis on injured reserve. Levante David has already kind of been up and down with some injuries. Very minor stuff. But he is, a 10-plus year NFL veteran, so you want to keep it easy on Levante David. This week, it just so happened, that in Philadelphia they decided to release former Bucs linebacker Devin White. And,
Shocker.
Yeah, big surprise here. But Evan, I mean, what better time to fix the relationship? I mean, how do you view this thing, right? Listen, I've spoken my piece on Devin White. I don't think he's back in Tampa. I don't think the Bucs pursue it. But you got to be honest with the needs of this defense right now. It feels a lot like Devin White needs the Bucs, and the Bucs may possibly need a guy like Devin White right now.
So I don't know what happened in Philly. That's a weird situation, right? Like that's because he was hurt and then he wasn't, and then he was healthy scratched, and then like you didn't hear anything and this and that, and like he was getting first team reps all at training camp, and then all of a sudden when the regular season starts, he doesn't make the trip with them to Brazil, and then you got him retweeting Levante David strip sacking Jalen Hurts during the game, and a weird situation with Devin White in Philly. Let me just come out and say it will not happen. And the Bucs will not be pursuing this. I don't know if Devin White would even want I just think both sides are ready to move on. I'd be stunned. I would be absolutely stunned if the Buccaneers signed Devin White. But again, it's not that. So I do agree maybe with the thing that you said. Like the Buccaneers could use a guy like Devin White, and Devin White could use a team like the Buccaneers, who it's like, kind of going back. I saw there's one, I forget who tweeted it, but somebody tweeted out like the Devin White to the Bucs front office, and it's the Happy Gilmore thing where he's talking to Chubbs. I'm stupid, you're smart, I was wrong, you were right. That could be a situation there. But look, I mean, Devin White wouldn't really, to me, doesn't solve a lot of their issues. Sure, he adds depth, he adds athleticism that KJ Britt doesn't have. And he obviously knows the Todd Bowles defense, but he's still not good in coverage. His trade request last year really alienated a lot of his teammates, a lot of his coaches, and I just think they were done with him, right? So I don't really know if a reunion is going to make much sense because they didn't really leave things on great terms. And it wasn't like Jordan Whitehead, right? Jordan Whitehead left, and that's another injury we got to watch out for, by the way, Jordan Whitehead. But Jordan Whitehead left, and it was kind of like oh, man, like it just didn't really work. Didn't have the money, didn't really work out that way. Jordan Whitehead comes back. This parting of ways was much different. This was two sides that were ready to move on. Devin White obviously was ready to move on last offseason when he requested trade. So, yes, it will not happen. It is fun to talk about because it's something juicy to talk about, right? But it will not happen. But again, a fun situation. I don't know what's going on with Devin White. The downfall of his career. Basically from 2020, right? It seemed like it's just after 2020, it seemed like it got worse and worse each year, and now he hasn't played in a single football game this year. So I don't know exactly what's going on with him. If it is something mental, I hope he figures it out. Because I think if it's something mental, it's keeping him off the football field, keeping him from what he likes to do, then. I hope you figure that out and find your way back, but it won't be in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I don't want to spend time speculating, but as you said, if it's something beyond the football field, then obviously want to wish him the best. There's a lot of times that I think people forget that these NFL players are real people with real emotions and real feelings. So I don't know what he's going through. Hopefully we do see him back on an NFL field, but just like you said, I do not believe it is in Tampa. Let's wrap it up. One more question here from the Cannon Fire crew in chat. Bryce says, if we bring in anyone that's become available, it should be Robert Saleh as a defensive assistant, consultant, and coordinator or whatever, just to help out that defense. For a lot of people who do not know, Aaron Rodgers, the coach killer, decided to make a change at the head coach position up there for the New York Jets, and Robert Saleh is no longer with the organization. Kind of a surprise to even him and the rest of the staff up there. Apparently, he was in the facility, and then they escorted him out with security the next minute. So, I mean...
Jets are going to jet, man. This is what it is.
Regardless
it's really quick. Not going to happen. Why would Todd Bowles do that?
You're right.
Like, why would he say, you know what? I'm gonna hire a guy that if things go south with me, you can just replace me with him. Like, why would he do that? Like he's still the defensive play caller. I don't think people realize like he doesn't spend much time with the offense. Like he really doesn't. Like he's pretty hands off with the offense. And I understand the head coaching role is different than a defensive coordinator role. But even if you brought him in as a consultant, one, why would Saleh do that when he's gonna be able to pick his defensive coordinator job this offseason, wherever he wants? And two, why would Bowles bring that in? Because you're not going to be sitting there saying like, oh, here's a potential guy to replace me. Like that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of names, and obviously when someone like that becomes available, you look at a defense that has been struggling in certain areas, and a lot of people think that it is as easy as signing him and bringing him into the to the organization and fixing things, but it just doesn't happen like that.
You know who's a pretty good defensive mind? Todd Bowles.
Yeah.
How about that?
I do think that this defensive staff continually doesn't get enough credit. I know they have been struggling a little bit, failed to make adjustments against the Falcons, unfortunately. But for the most part, I think Todd Bowles has done more good than bad as his tenure heading the defense for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So, a nice name being tossed out there, a suggestion, but I don't know. As fun as it would be, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. He's going to have his pick and also job.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off again, but the chat said that's why the offense is good. Oh, make a joke about him being hands off.
Right.
Who hired Liam Cohen?
Yeah,
Todd Bowles. Who hired Dave Canales? Who got a head coaching job? Todd Bowles. I think Bowles deserves a little. I'm not saying Bowles is great, right? A matter of fact, last year when they were 3-5 after that Houston game, I pretty much said he should be fired. I did, but he turned this thing around, and I think people are a little too harsh on Bowles at this point.
I think a lot of people are a little too harsh on Bowles. I don't think either of us has said that he is the upper echelon of NFL coach, and I think there's a lot of things that he's done. I'll tell you this, I am a lot more doubtful of Todd Bowles now than I was 2 weeks into the season, solely because of the performance against Denver. That team was not ready to play. That team was not in the right mindset to go out there and win or damn near play a football game because they didn't show up till the second half. So, I mean, a performance like that is when I look directly at the coaching staff and I look directly at Todd Bowles not having his team ready to play. Execution errors are one thing, but that team was lethargic from kickoff. So that's on Todd Bowles. Yeah. Stuff like that is what keeps him from reaching that next level. But I do agree, and I think you and I share this sentiment, he probably deserves a little more respect among the fan base than he is given because, let's face it, has not missed the playoffs so far as head coach of the Bucs.
No, and look, I mean, people who blew the back-to-back Super Bowl, Todd Bowles. Look, we talk about that, and we were actually talking about the NFC Championship game before the show started. That game was tied, by the way. It wasn't like the Bucs had the lead. And Todd Bowles blitzed and everything. So that game, there's no guarantee the Bucs win that game. People pinning literally losing a Super Bowl on Todd Bowles when he was one of the main reasons why they won the Super Bowl in the first place for this game plan versus Kansas City is pretty interesting. They don't really mention that at all, but they'll mention the Los Angeles game quite often.
I'd also just like to add the context that NFC divisional round game against the Rams, it was 27-0 at one point.
I think it was 27. Yeah, it was not pretty.
It was not pretty for Tampa Bay. So obviously the defense had to buckle down at some point to get them back into that.
Again, and you're not saying he's a top 5 head coach. You might not even say he's a top 10 head coach. I'm not either. I just think he's better than some people give him credit for. I just think the Bucs could do a lot worse, is what I'm trying to say, basically.
Yeah, I agree. And honestly, this whole conversation about Todd Bowles, we could do another podcast episode or two on it by itself, probably. I think if we open that can of worms right now, we'll be on the air until the hurricane takes out my power. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's just about going to do it for this midweek episode of the Cannon Fire podcast. I wanted to say thank you to each and every person who hung out with us live over on YouTube. The Beggies 95, Michael, Cannon Fire Crew, Bry, KIF, our good buddy Mikey Kelly, Haas 83, Buzzard Bob checking in, Nestor Cervantes. Appreciate you guys very much. Anybody else that I may have missed. Stay safe. this week, folks. If you are local to the area, if you are in Florida, if you live along the coast, if you are in one of these cities just like me around Tampa Bay, be safe, be prepared, be as vigilant as you can be, and be safe. We hope to talk to you on the other side of this thing. As far as the rest of this week's coverage goes, everything should be according to plan. Like we are scheduled to give you your usual pregame coverage, but if I end up losing power, then maybe we don't get a Friday podcast. But I'm hoping that by Sunday, everything should be good to go on this side of town. So best case scenario, we talk to you again on Friday, or Evan has a video for you guys on the YouTube channel as well throughout the rest of the week. Worst case scenario, we talk to you Sunday, and if it's worse than that, then obviously we will keep you updated. But Hurricane Milton, it's going to be nasty. Potentially one of the worst storms to hit this area in a century. The worst storm to hit this area in my lifetime. So not entirely sure what to expect, but extending our well wishes to you and our listeners. We hope you are safe, and hope you make it through this thing.
Yeah, it's that's the number one, right? Football's secondary to this, and hopefully you guys are safe. Guys are well prepared and everything. I know obviously it's not the first hurricane you guys have had to deal with, but like Rhett said, this one's gonna be, from the sounds of it, it's gonna be a pretty good one. So thoughts are with everyone. Obviously, me up in Pennsylvania, Rhett, hope you stay safe as well. So yeah, just hope everybody stays safe. If you were told to evacuate, if you were ordered to evacuate, I hope you listened. I hope you didn't, force the issue. I know it's a hard decision, but stay as safe as possible, and hopefully, we will talk to you Friday, right? Hopefully we'll talk to you Friday, and it'll be operate as a normal week, right? So hopefully we'll have all of our normal coverage. Hopefully that won't really change much. And but again, just like Rhett said, if it does, we will update you guys. Stay tuned to our social media. Stay tuned to the YouTube, the community page, whatever. We will update you guys if anything changes. But just stay safe, guys. That's the number one thing here.
Yeah, absolutely. And just remember, at the end of the day, on the other side of this thing, let's pick each other up. Let's look out for everybody. I think this area, especially a lot of the beach cities, they're going to be dealing with some cleanup for quite a while. This is going to be one hell of a storm. So regardless of if it moves or what the meteorologist said, people are going to feel it around this area. So again, wishing you all the best. Don't want to drag this out too long, but you can't be too careful with these kind of things. And hopefully we will talk to you soon. Follow the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show, and of course, Buccaneer news as it happens. Speaking of Bucs news as it happens, you can follow my co-host Evan on Instagram at Bucs_daily. You can also find him on Twitter at EvanNFL, and check out his written work at BucsNation.com. What have you got in the hopper this week?
Yeah, gonna have the Q&A with the Saints SB Nation site. Also gonna have my X Factor out. And then, after the game, we'll have the day after reactions. So, it's going to be back into the swing of things, right? After this 10-day break the Bucs have had, but, back into the normal routine, for week 5, week 6. And, then also, here on the channel, like I said, we still very much are planning to do our normal thing. So, betting the Bucs or players to watch, like that stuff still should be out. There shouldn't be an issue there. So stay tuned for that as well. The coverage has really done well, because of you guys, right? You guys are the ones watching it. You guys are the ones interacting with it. So we really appreciate all the support, and looking forward to getting back into the little break was nice, but it's nice to get back into the swing of things here. And we got a football game to cover on Sunday. So
absolutely. Thank you guys once again. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off from my co-host, Evan Wanish. We will catch you in the next one, hopefully with some injury updates and some more pregame coverage as the Buccaneers get ready to take on the New Orleans Saints. Oh, it is Saints week, man. You can smell it in the air, and it doesn't smell good, quite frankly. We'll talk to you in the next one. Until then, and as always, thank you for listening, and go Bucs.